Thank you so much for joining me tonight. Tonight is Saturday Night Crafting and I've got a really awesome technique to share with you tonight. And we are going to make two cards out of this one technique. I'm going to show you two different ways that we can use it. It's fun, easy, and stunning. It is also great for your big background stamps if you've got any of those. And if you don't, then just grab some of your smaller stamps and just kind of clutter stamp them all over your piece of vellum and you can get the same effect going on. So I'm going to use this stamp, which is from Wow, and I've got a piece of thick vellum cardstock. So if you've got thicker vellum, this will work best because I'm going to heat emboss on it, and vellum can get kind of warped when you add the heat to it. So if you have a thicker vellum cardstock, that's really great. I don't remember what this one is. I think it is 260 GSM, but I'm not sure. Don't forget your anti-static powder tool. So whether you've got the bag, whether you've just got talcum powder, whether you just have cornstarch, whatever you have, make sure you use that when you're doing embossing, especially on vellum, because it is really staticky and it will really stick on there. So we are going to ink up our stamp using Versamark or whatever clear sticky ink you've got. And I'm going to start by using black embossing powder. Now I'm going to show you two different ways that we can add on our black color. I find black really effective. You can use whatever color you've got in your stash or whatever you want to do. But if you have not got colored embossing powder, but you have got clear, then that will work as well. I use VersaFine Onyx Black in all my stamping. It is my go-to black ink, and I'll share with you how you can do that as well. So I've stuck my embossing powder on there and I'm going to use my heat tool. This is my Wow heat tool. It's got a low setting and a high setting, and I am using it on the high setting and moving it quite quickly around until it's all melted, and then you can see you get this gorgeous shine on the front. Now if you don't have a black embossing powder but you do have a black ink, or even if you don't have a black ink, if you've got a sticky ink, so you want a pigment ink, not a dye ink, you want a pigment ink, you can go ahead and stamp it with your pigment ink, stick it down, and then you can add clear embossing powder over top of that pigment ink and you will get the same kind of effect, and that way you can have whatever color embossing powder you want. Well, it will look like you've got a colored embossing powder is what I'm trying to say. So as long as you've got clear embossing powder and you've got some pigment inks, you can make whatever color you want. So again, I'm going to go ahead and heat set it. I'm going to move it quite quickly, quite fast, so I'm not warping my cardstock. And then you can see the difference between the two different ones. So the one on the right is quite black, on the one on the left is a little bit almost bluish tinge to it. But I like the black embossing powder a little bit better. I get a bit more of a fine detail to it. Whereas the one on the right, the ink kind of bled a little bit into the paper and just gave me slightly thicker lines. Not by much, but just slightly. Now, if you've watched the last couple of videos, I love these acrylic paint pens. They are just these cheap acrylic paint pens off of Amazon. I'll link the ones that I bought in the UK, but honestly, just type in acrylic paint pen and that's what you'll get. You can also use permanent pens, so you can use Sharpies, you can use alcohol markers, you can use Copics, whatever you have in your stash. I love the acrylic paint pens because they are quite juicy and they were just really vibrant and they really showed up quite well. Now, if you didn't see me just there, I took my embossed image, I turned it over, and we are coloring on the back side. So a lot of you will have seen this before. It's a really fun, easy technique to do with vellum, and you can also do this with acetate as well. But it's fantastic because you can be a bit messy on the back. As long as you're not going outside of those black lines too much, you can color over the black lines. It doesn't really matter. So you can do some very fast coloring from the back side because we don't have to be exact and precise, and then we're not having to worry about coloring over our embossing powder and smudging that, because sometimes when you use alcohol markers they can actually pick up your embossing powder that you have set on the front and can kind of damage it. So here it is, hot mess from the back, but boom, look at it from the front. I love it. I love it, love it, love it. It is so colorful, it's so vibrant, it's so pretty. I love it. It's such a fun way to use vellum in your project. Now, how do you stick the vellum down? I'm going to share with you two different ways. My first and favorite way is with vellum. I always just stick adhesive on the back of vellum. The whole entire piece of vellum I cover in adhesive. So I have some A5 adhesive sheets. They are just double-sided sticky tape. So I'm going to peel off one of the corners, just like a side in there, and then I stick my vellum, line it up nice and carefully onto that edge, push down that one edge, and then I pull the release paper from behind it and just kind of glide my hand along it to make sure it's nice and flat with no bubbles, and then it's all lined up perfectly on top of that piece of double-sided tape. If you don't have big sheets of double-sided tape, if you've got a nice fat roll of tape, that will work. The only downside if you've got thinner rolls of tape is you might see the adhesive lines if you don't get it nice and close together. So this is my favorite trick to do with vellum, is just make the whole thing sticky, and then you don't get any sticky lines showing through your vellum. Now I'm going to trim this down to fit my card base a little bit better. I actually went about 1 centimeter on both sides, smaller than my card base, so I had a nice little border around my card. So now it looks a bit white, but that's because the release sheet is on there, and you can see I missed some bits on the right hand side and the top there. I forgot to color those in. Oops. Never mind, we will make sure we do better on the next one. So here's my card base. As you can see, I've got a nice little border around there, and to stick it on there I'm going to do the exact same as I did a minute ago when I applied it onto the sticky adhesive. I'm going to peel that top edge down. I'm going to line it up using the release sheet, so I'm only touching the release sheet onto my card and kind of sliding it into position. Once I've got it exactly where I want it, I can push that top edge down, which then seals it into place. And then I can pull out that release sheet while moving my hand down the piece of vellum, and then I get no bubbles and it's perfectly on there. So that's card base number 1, and I'll show you how I decorate it in a minute. Here's the second one. So this one I only colored the middle bit. I didn't do any of the edges, purely because I wanted to use one of these new frame dies which I purchased from Craftelier. I'll link them down below for you. They're a great site. They're based in Spain and they have fantastic prices, and if you order enough you get free shipping, so I love it. But I've got these frames and I really wanted to use them, and I thought we could do a little kind of basic shaker card. So I've cut my frame out and I'm going to use that as a little guide to trim my vellum. So I'm just kind of holding it on top of there and then just trimming carefully my vellum from underneath it. Because it's a frame, it cuts out the frame, so I can't cut out my piece of vellum, otherwise I will cut the whole middle out of it as well. So I've got my frame done, and you can see that my little piece of paper that I've just cut out will fit nicely on the back of that frame. To keep this nice and simple and easy again, because I like to be a bit simple, I'm going to take a piece of cardstock, that same A5 double-sided sticky sheets, and I'm just going to stick a whole entire sheet of A5 card right on top of that A5 sticky sheet, and then that way this piece of cardstock is self-adhesive. So I'm going to do the same thing, pull out that release paper, and then I'm going to run it through my die cut machine and cut myself out 2 frames. Because I want to build this up to be a little bit of a shaker card, but I don't want loads of movement, because I really want to see the shaker bits under the vellum. And because vellum is a kind of frosted look to it, it's really easy to lose your shaker bits if you make the dimension too big. So I pull off that first release sheet and stick on my beautiful little colored embossed bit of paper. I'm going to stick that down onto my little square, or rectangle I should say, get my shapes right, and then I just line it up over top of the next one because it's already got that adhesive on it. It's going to be nice and sticky, and that will pinch my little piece of vellum right there nicely on the top. And then I can go ahead and add another layer, which is the first layer I used to cut out my vellum, and I'm going to stick that right on top of there again. So then I've got 2 layers of cardstock. And my cardstock is about 350 GSM, so it's quite thick. So I'm going to have 2 layers of cardstock underneath my vellum top panel. And then that way, when I stick this on top of my card, I will still see those shaker bits really quite clearly. So these are some little fun shaker bits from Alina's shop. I'll link them down below. She's got several different colors of these fun kind of circular sequins. And if I had raised this up a bit too much, if I put some foam tape on the back of my panel, it would be really hard to see it. You could hear it, but you wouldn't see it very well because it's not clear. So I'm going to just take my liquid adhesive and put some of that onto the back of that frame. And then that way it's only 2 layers thick, and those shaker bits will still move about, but they won't be invisible. They'll be very noticeable. So you'll see it in a second. I'll hold it a bit closer and you'll see you get a really clear view of those fun shaker elements behind the vellum. So again, I just press it down nice and gently and make sure it's nice and adhered and my shaker bits are moving about inside. And then when I hold it up, you can see those little circle bits and you can see the colors through that vellum a bit. It just gives it a bit more character behind that panel. Now, through the magic of videoing, I can share with you how I finished these cards off. I wanted to focus on the technique primarily, but I will run you through how I finished them. Now I wanted to have quite fun, cheery birthday cards for this one, so I used this fun stamp set here on the right, which is a Say It With Stamps by Becky Moore, and it's the Inside Out Happy Birthday Photopolymer stamps. And then also my favorite die set, which is from Trinity Stamps, the Happy and the Birthday dies. They are fantastic, so I used those on both sets of cards and finished them off. So that first panel I did on the right here, I traced it with a black pen to kind of make it have a little bit of a frame to it. So I just took a ruler and traced it, and then I die cut out Happy and Birthday using those dies and colored them with some Tim Holtz Distress ink and stuck a funny little sentiment through the middle. And then on this one I kind of curled my sentiment. I used my Pink Fresh Studios banner die set. I gave it a little curl with my bone folder and then popped up one side with some foam, you can see there, and then the other side glued straight onto the card, added some little gems from Alina's shop, and that kind of finished off that card. And then I gave it a little funny sentiment on the inside as well. So I hope you enjoyed tonight's technique and enjoyed these cards. I would love to see it if you had a go. My Facebook group link is down in the description box, as well as my Instagram if you want to tag me in anything. But I hope you had fun tonight, and I look forward to seeing you again next week. Take care. Have a fantastic weekend. Bye.